Welcome to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast, where we weave the threads of traditional living into the tapestry of modern day life. I'm Hannah Forrest, a herbalist and naturopath with a deep love for plants, seasons, and the quiet rituals that shape how we live and care for ourselves. This podcast is an invitation to slow down and reconnect with the wisdom of the natural world through herbal medicine, folklore, seasonal living, ritual, astrology, and simple earth-honoring practices that can be gently folded into everyday life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. I wish to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and record, the Wurundjeri people. I honour their enduring connection to the lands, waters, and communities, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Always for the New Age podcast. My name is Hannah, and today we have the very first solo episode of the year. I'm so excited. Last season, as you may have heard, I actually only managed to fit in one solo episode at the very end of the season. So I thought, let's kick it off and do one very early, and you can definitely expect more solo episodes this season. So today we're going to be talking about Lughnasadh, or some people know it as Lammas, and it is the first harvest festival. So this is a Wheel of the Year Almanac episode. If you don't know what the Wheel of the Year is, the Wheel of the Year refers to a visual representation of the 8 annual Celtic pagan celebrations that honour the cycles of the earth. In some schools of thought, the wheel represents the journey of the god and goddess as they dance through the seasons, demonstrating themes of birth, courtship, marriage and pregnancy, death, and circling back to a period of rebirth. These themes mirror the change evident throughout the natural world too. New life beginning in spring, growth and strength in the summer, reflecting great abundance at harvest season in the fall, and the need to retreat and reflect in the cold depths of winter. We can look to these stories as a guide for our own lives and show our inextricable connection to nature that forever links us to our origins and those who walked before us. So if you've never seen what the Wheel of the Year looks like, you can go onto my Substack, because I have been writing out I've only done 2, I think, so far, but my goal is to get all 8 Sabbats into the Substack. Doing an almanac post where it's basically what I'm going to talk about today, a rundown of what the Sabbat is, the correspondences, the symbolism, some of the history of the name. And so I actually have a picture on my very first one. I actually think I have a whole separate post about the Wheel of the Year for those who are brand new to the concept. But again, as I said, it's a visual representation of the way that the seasons change throughout the year. A lot of us are very used to the 4 seasons of the year, but really that isn't a great representation of what happens outside of our windows. You'll know if you've been around here for a while that I'm really big on observational practice as a devotional practice, as a part of your spiritual craft, as a part of just being connected with the natural world. So that means look outside your window, go for a daily walk, just pay attention, pick one tree and watch it through all 4 seasons or 8 and see how it changes, because really it's much more nuanced than just 4 big seasons. And living here in Australia, you really get to see this because our climate is really different to those in the Northern Hemisphere. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit further along in this episode. But definitely have a Google, and I might even share a picture in a post or in my stories so you can see it as well on Instagram. But I'll also put my Wheel of the Year post in the show notes so you can easily find it and have a look. So we're talking about Lughnasadh or Lammas today. We're going to talk a little bit about the history and folklore, the deities associated with this season, the associations and correspondences, activities and ways to celebrate. And really, I'm just hoping to give you a well-rounded understanding of this spoke on the wheel and how you can observe and celebrate this Sabbath in your own life in really easily approachable ways. So Lughnasadh, the name, is Irish Gaelic for commemoration of Lugh, or some people also feel it translates to Lugh's gathering. And it was established by Lugh to honour his foster mother, Tialtu. I'm probably butchering that, sorry. I usually look up how to say these words. Who died from exhaustion after clearing the plains of Ireland for agriculture. It's a celebration of the harvest and a commemoration of her sacrifice. And so, in honor of her, there were actually traditionally games held and lots of competitions and shows of strength. And then, of course, feasting and merriment in honor of her. Lughnasadh, it is the Celtic kind of pagan version of this holiday. But as we know, Christianity kind of adopted a lot of these Sabbats, these holidays, these seasonal markers to convert people to their religion. So, of course, there is a Christian version, and that is Lammas. And this is actually new information to me. I didn't realize that there was that Lammas was so heavily celebrated in the Christian culture. But it's Anglo-Saxon for Loafmas, which a lot of us have heard about as a name for Lughnasadh, Lammas. And actually, traditionally, it was a harvest festival. It was started in England, and you would bake a bread using the first grain harvested of the season and take it to church to be blessed. And it was bad luck, I think in both cultures, but particularly in Lammas, it was bad luck or bad omen to have to harvest your grain before the seasonal holiday, because it meant that you hadn't produced enough in the previous season to see your family through the year. And so if you were abundant enough and had a big enough harvest the previous year, you wouldn't have needed to harvest new grain until this point. So that's where that comes from. And, it was the first idea as to whether your family was then likely to have enough food to preserve and consume through the rest of the season, through autumn and winter, and then through to the next harvest, right? Like, this is the first harvest. They got to see how much yield they had, how much they were able to grow. And it was that first kind of indicating point as to whether they would actually be able to provide for their families, because they didn't have grocery stores like we do now, where if you run out of flour, you just go and buy some more. So this was really a very pivotal time, and actually a really root chakra time, I would say, where it's just about survival to its very core in a very practical way. So would your family starve, or would you have the supplies to sustain you as the nights grew longer? If we're looking at this through a more Wiccan lens, they look at the journey of the god and goddess. And so this is a time of year when the sun god has realized that he's going to have to sacrifice himself in order to provide for his people across the next cycle, and transforms into the god of the harvest, ready to be cut down and kept for the winter. There is a significant archetypal representation of the themes of death and rebirth at this point in time. And then the mother goddess is pregnant at this time too, ready to begin her journey into the underworld to complete her pregnancy, readying herself to birth the god once again on the winter solstice. And this is why the winter solstice is considered, for some people, myself included, to be the witch's new year, as this is the time that the wheel completes its turn and begins again, where the god is reborn. And so I spoke about this recently in my Substack post about the new year, and how there are many different points through the year that you could consider your new year point. And actually, you could consider a couple of points, new year points. I don't think that we have to necessarily limit it to one. I like to look at my birthday as my personal, astrological new year. And then I look at the winter solstice as the witch's new year for me. So, do what works for you. But that's why some people, myself included, feel that is why the winter solstice is the witch's new year instead of Samhain. So in Frances Billinghurst's book, Dancing the Sacred Wheel, which I love and I've spoken about so many times, both on Substack and on the podcast, she is Australian, and she reflects on how this changes for people living in the Southern Hemisphere. So we're in England in the Northern Hemisphere. Their produce is just beginning to ripen, the grain is just getting plump and is right or is ready for the picking. And in Australia at this time of year, we're seeing that what hasn't already been harvested is burning up and dying off, which if you have a garden right now, you would totally understand. We're about to hit February, and I should say that Lughnasadh is on February 2nd is the traditional date, but each year there's traditional dates, so you can go off of those, and that just keeps it simple for me. There's not really one defining moment that you like technically astrologically or astronomically you could pick a time, but really it's a season. We're talking about a season, right? Not a particular moment in time. So I think that the traditional dates work just fine for me because it's easy to remember those dates every single year. But February 2nd is the traditional date for Lughnasadh here in Australia. And so you can see that in February, stuff is toast. Like my garden is up there burning right now as we speak. My oregano just died. So for us, it's a little bit different. But there's ways that we can work with this energy and this archetype in our own lives here. And so Frances speaks to our experience in Australia being more aligned with the time of a high summer goddess, but it is still a great time for releasing and letting go and burning away what no longer serves us. So, this is just part of that seasonal practice where we have to look outside of our window, connect with the world around us, connect with our own land, with our plants, and really figure out what that looks like for us, what this kind of celebration looks like for us. And maybe we let that influence the way that we celebrate too. So, what are some ways that you could celebrate? Well, building seasonal tables and altars is great. I love that. I love a little altar. It does not have to be big. They can be very simple. If you are someone who is not out of the broom closet yet, you can make travel altars, which is basically an altar that fits inside of a tin or can be packed up into a tin and used as needed, taken out as needed. So there's many ways you can do this, but I love just, what we're about here is hearth witchery, hearth magic, casual magic, practical magic, ways that we can incorporate our spiritual craft into our everyday life in really meaningful but simple ways. And so I love little nooks. So a little mini altar on a windowsill, and then I've got one on top of my shoe cabinet. That's my bigger altar. But then I've got kind of sacred spaces on my TV cabinet. And if I didn't have a toddler, I'd still have one beside my bed. But you can do wall shelves. You can do, oh man, your imagination really is the limit. You could do a garden altar. That would be beautiful, especially if you are honoring the Fae. So, again, this is what's beautiful about paganism, about witchcraft, is you can really make it your own. But you can also decorate your home. So, let's not leave it to the muggles, right? Like, we don't just have to decorate for Easter or Christmas. We can decorate 8 times a year or more, which is so great. So I love to bring additional, I work with the 4 major seasons with my decorating, but then we'll bring in additional elements as each Sabbath happens. So for example, the beginning of autumn, I will bring in, change out a cloth, the tablecloth, or, I will change out some of my crystals to be more aligned with the season. I might bring out some little toadstools and, different things of different colors that suit autumn. But then through the season, as each Sabbath happens, we'll go out and we'll gather pine cones when they're ready, or we will bring some of the autumn maple leaves inside once they fall, because right now here they're still green. So, later in the season, closer to Samhain, we'll be bringing those elements in and incorporating them into our seasonal tables and altars. And I can do that with my son as well, which is really nice. So yeah, you could pop up, all manner of things. You could put a little leaf garland up, or dried orange slices. But then when it's closer to Samhain, you can bring out some little ghosty figurines or, whatever it is you want to do. And then also, we can just switch up our weekly menus. We can start to change the way that we're eating. So, eating seasonally is part of that observational practice. What is actually meant to be growing around us right now? Let's focus on incorporating those foods. And let's be realistic. Are we all going to eat completely seasonally all the time? Probably not. But if you can start to incorporate more low and slow cooked foods, more warming spices, more ginger, chili, garlic, also bolstering our immune systems as we head into the cooler months. And then, your root vegetables, potatoes, sweet potato, turnips. We all know the cool turnip thing that's later in the season where you get to carve them out and they look absolutely terrifying. That's not a Lughnasadh thing. That's more of a Samhain thing, but they are hilarious. If you've never Googled like a turnip jack-o'-lantern, please do it. It is, yeah, it's going to haunt your nightmares. But I think, incorporating pumpkins, pumpkin soups, things that are easier on the digestion, those types of things start now. And of course, to celebrate the actual Sabbath, bake a loaf of bread. Why not? Like, this is the grain harvest. Let's do it. Let's bake bread. And that kind of leads me into some of the correspondences for this season, because I think it's easy to want to look these things up in a book, but if you really think about it, the way to connect in is by connecting with the sensory experience of the season. So, I've got this in my post on Lughnasadh, but think about the crust, the golden crust of a fresh loaf of bread, and the crackle as you squeeze that loaf of bread, and the crunch of dry leaves, and the color of fallen leaves, and, think about the flames of a bonfire, and the sap of a maple tree. There's so many different ways you can begin to imagine the colors that would be perfect for this season. So you're thinking orange, brown in Australia, very dead brown, reds, even maybe some pinks, and just those really autumnal colors. And, maybe we're incorporating some greens, because again, things here haven't turned yet. So for us in Queensland, there's definitely still some green about. So green is another color you can incorporate. So there's just so many ways to imagine the palette. So just go outside and take a look, and maybe in your area, there's still some beautiful jasmine. So white is a color you incorporate, white and green. But then also, let's look at stones in the same way. So you can go with the color of the stone, so citrine, carnelian, red and brown jasper, tiger's eye, but then also look at the element that you want to bring in energetically. So for this time of year, it was also a great time for cleaning your home, clearing out what, again, is no longer serving you literally and energetically. But also protecting your home. So clearing out any rubbish, any dust, any old energy, not only help to protect your immune system and keep your family well through the winter season, when traditionally you would have been inside more as the weather got colder and the skies got darker. But then, also we want to bring in that protection element, because in folklore, there are a lot of beings that come around in the wintertime. So we're preparing for that now. So stones that are protective, like tiger's eye, for example, are great. Another stone you might want to include is aventurine. But think about what stones, maybe you want to bring in some onyx, because we're looking at protection, or obsidian. So yeah, and stones that represent abundance too, because abundance and prosperity are really big themes for this time of year, because again, it's a harvest festival. How much were you able to grow through the growing season, and how abundant will you be through the cooler, darker months? So, choosing stones, and then choosing plants as well to work with that are going to call in abundance, prosperity, and protection and cleansing. So, these are plants like rosemary. These are plants like mugwort for dreaming and planning, and also meadowsweet to ward off negative energy and attract love, peace, and happiness. You could be incorporating plants that support your immunity, like thyme and elderberry, ginger and cinnamon. They're, yarrow for protection as well. Mint and basil to call in abundance, if your basil's still green. So there are so many different ways. And this is what I love about the way that I work, is that, it's like, how multidimensional is my thinking? How can I look at things from all angles to create a really deep and meaningful practice that resonates with me? So there's also, of course, deity work, which I really want to cover more this year. I think it's a journey that I've been on for many years, but want to dive a lot deeper with in 2026. And so this is going to reflect in my content too, I hope. I'm really hoping to get people in to talk about protection magic and deity work. So they're two big focuses for me personally this year. But symbols and deities. So deities for this season include Ceres, the Roman goddess of the harvest and the grain; Demeter, the Greek goddess who rules the changing of the seasons, and she's the mother of Persephone; Hestia, and if you don't know the story of Demeter and Persephone, definitely look that up, like the mythology behind that. Hestia is the Greek goddess of the hearth and protector of the home, great for this time of year. Lu, of course, he's the namesake for Lughnasadh, and he is the Celtic god of craftsmanship and the harvest. Renenutut, Egyptian goddess of nourishment, the hearth, and fertility; Saturn, the god of the harvest and agriculture; and Vesta, the Roman guardian of the hearth and home, protector of the sacred fire. These are not the only deities you could work with. You could work with Bridget. There are so many. And obviously, you're always going to have connections with a deity outside of just the list that goes with the season too, right? So the ones I've been really cool to work with over the last couple of years since falling pregnant have been Bridget. And actually, Bridget's always spoken to me from the very beginning, kind of nudging me towards the Hearth Witch path. Also, Artemis is one that I've worked really closely with too. So you can't just forget about your kind of close deities, but these are some other ones you could choose to honor through the season or for longer as well. And some of the symbols. So even though this is a harvest festival, fire is definitely a part of this festival. And so looking at themes around kind of these autumn colors and these themes of death and rebirth and of protection and, all of these things. So you might be looking at fire and flames, of course, candles, wheat and corn dollies, bread, scythes or sunflowers, and then, of course, a sheaf of wheat, for example, like the actual sheaf of wheat, and a torch to represent Demeter. So each deity is going to have their own individual symbols as well. If you are stuck on some other ways to celebrate, I always love to refer people back to the episode that I did. I've done two with her, but on one of the episodes that I did with Holly Moffat, and we talked about the pagan home. So paganism in a family setting and how to celebrate in ways that are not going to overwhelm you, that are sustainable for you and your family, because it doesn't have to be exactly the same all year, every year. And it doesn't have to be, you killing yourself to make it a great time for the kids. Like, there's so many different ways that you can observe. Sometimes it's just a meal. My husband loves every Sabbath. It actually doesn't matter what Sabbath. He wants the same thing. It's this particular vegan roast I do with roast veggies and gravy. And he wants that every single Sabbath. And for him and for us, that has become like that embodied feeling of that magical, energetic transformation, that pivotal moment where we're moving from one season to the next, when we have this meal and we feel it in our bodies, we taste it, we sense it, and for us that is an anchoring to that moment. But of course, there's so many different ways you can celebrate in families. You could do some felt craft, you can do some craft with leaves, you could do some little rituals around the bay leaf burning, or you could burn like an autumn leaf if you wanted to. But there are just so many ways to get creative and celebrate in a family setting. You could make some later, I don't know if it's this season or later in the season, but mulled wine when it comes. There are just so many different baked goods you can try. A grain salad would be really nice, like a warm grain salad. So I encourage you to, again, get creative, explore, experiment, go on some family outings, go for a hike, observe what's happening in the forest, in the woods, at the beach, and just really take time together as well. I think, that's the beautiful thing. We get 8 markers in the year or more as pagans to, remember to slow down and spend quality time with each other and honor each other and honor the earth. You could choose to leave out some offerings to the Fae or, just to the earth, to the land spirits. You could offer milk, honey, even just water. You could offer some bread or some crumbs. Like, there's so many different ways, some fruit, to leave offerings as well. And if you are out and about and you feel the presence of a spirit, of course, one of the age-old ones is to leave a piece of hair in gratitude and thanks. But I also know people who keep small crystals with them, but I don't know how I feel about that one. So yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about Lughnasadh. I hope that you're excited to start to weave in some of these practices into your own lives, and definitely go and check out. I'll link both my Wheel of the Year intro post for those of you who are totally new to the concept, and then also I'll link the Lughnasadh Almanac post, which runs down a lot of what I've just talked about. I just wanted to get it on the airwaves too. So for those of you who only like listening to podcasts, you have it here to listen to. The information's here when you want it, and it's nice and short. I think one of my goals for this year is to have a lot more varied length for episodes, and I will let you in, for those of you who are dedicated and you're listening to this episode right now, I'll let you in on a little secret, because we've been sticking to a fortnightly schedule for a while now, except for over Christmas, but we're actually going to be introducing additional episodes. So I didn't realize this was going to happen so quickly, but stay tuned, because our first one is next week, and it's with a recurring guest who is going to be doing astrological updates. So it's going to be an astro forecast for the month ahead, and you all have heard from this guest on the podcast before. Everybody loves her. So these will be short little episodes that you can listen to with practical ritual advice that you can bring into your practice and, run with and get creative with in that way too, to harness the energy of the planets for the next month, so we can carry you through the year with really embodied and enjoyable ways to work with the planets. Yeah, just work with the planets. Work with your astrology, work with the transits. So really excited for that. So again, stay tuned for next week. I'll probably put out a little sneak peek beforehand as usual. And just enjoy Lughnasadh. May we all just celebrate and be merry, and also show our thanks for the season gone. This is a big festival of gratitude. So I'm just going to say that I'm grateful for you being here and for your support, and we're growing as a community, and that's my number one goal for this year, is to spread more of my witchy love with the people who are interested in learning and being a part of a community like this. So I'll talk to you in a future episode, and thank you again. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Your support means the world to me, and if you have a free moment and would like to leave a review, a comment, or a rating on your platform of choice, that would go a long way towards helping me to grow the podcast and reach more people. If you aren't already subscribed, check out my Substack newsletter. Over there, I share lots of free resources, as well as an option to join as a paid subscriber, which is another beautiful way you can support my work. May what you've heard today guide you in living a little more slowly and a little more connected.